Have you felt how a certain kind of closeness leaves you smaller? How favors turn into fees? How praise arrives when you are useful and frost arrives when you draw a line? How your day becomes a corridor of emergencies that are not yours? Arthur Schopenhauer, staring through his dark lens at the restless will beneath polite surfaces, reached for a crude metaphor about parasitism. Keep the warning, drop the slur. The reality to face is an extractive style of relating that can wear any face and flourish in any room where hunger is high and standards are low. Read the pages that follow as one unbroken march through that lens. What the will wants, how the mask works, where romance tilts into harvest, why fog favors theater over truth, how real supply makes you harder to drain, and how endings without drama make space for bonds that strengthen instead of siphon. Take it as a charter for steadiness, not a complaint about fate. Schopenhauer begins below the level of manners. Life, he says, is driven by a blind press he calls the will, longing without finish, reaching before reflecting. Culture at its best interrupts that push with form, carving structure out of appetite, turning heat into order through craft, law, music, and thought. Decline begins when will dictates the city's terms, when immediacy outranks patience, when relief replaces truth as arbiter, when sentiment becomes sovereign and judges from the bench of feeling. In that air, relationships tilt. Presence is treated as fuel, attention as a tap, generosity as a retainer. The mask is tenderness. The engine is taking. Extraction is older than any platform. It is the ancient bargain by which energy is harvested without reciprocity and justified with a story about love, need, justice, or destiny. It thrives where standards are called cruelty and where selection is recoded as arrogance. It prefers fog to form because fog hides accounts. It prefers speed to sequence because speed outruns memory. It prefers slogans to statutes because statutes impose costs on moods. None of this is native to a sex. It is native to the will when the will is ungoverned. Form is the counter. Form is a promise kept when nobody claps. Form is a calendar that refuses to be drafted by crisis. Form is a ledger that tells the truth in numbers when the room prefers tears. Form is the boring repetition by which craft survives fashion. Where form holds, extraction is forced to name itself or leave. Where form is mocked, extraction wraps itself in the language of care and reassigns your day. This is why Schopenhauer's severity can be mercy. Severity relocates the lever from other people's moods to your own law. The will still press for shortcuts. You answer by giving shape to hours, by building things that reality can weigh, by refusing to star in other people's plays when your hands were meant to build beams. The image of the parasite then becomes less a gendered insult than a diagram of incentives. Take without building, soften standards until taking sounds noble, and accuse edges of harm. Seeing the diagram allows you to redraw the room, not with speeches, with form that outlasts weather. The drain begins where your wish writes the script. The will wants to be central without the weight of consequence. It wants anesthesia instead of repair. It wants exemption from the rules that keep other lives upright. An extractive dynamic arrives as answer to those wishes. It praises your importance and converts your calendar into proof. It offers soothing and converts your silence into policy. It sanctifies your specialness and converts your resources into tribute. The mask can be romance, crisis, innocence, cause. The through line is simple. Your energy becomes somebody else's oxygen in ways that never become mutual structure. Modern markets amplify the hook. Outrage and validation are currencies paid to tired minds. Signal replaces substance because signals travel faster. Every domain learns to sell by atmosphere. Helplessness is a signal that buys labor. Indignation is a signal that buys allies. Adoration is a signal that buys provision. None of those signals is unique to women. All of them live wherever incentives reward appearance over proof. The mechanism that locks you in is intermittent reward. Warmth arrives unpredictably, and the chase begins. Access opens and closes, and your midbrain writes theology. Crisis loops, and you rename captivity as devotion. Self-deception keeps the loop running. The judge says he is principled while he arbitrates feuds that are not his. The hero says he is loving while he solves problems designed to return. The priest says he is compassionate while he grants absolution that guarantees no change. Each role shrinks a man while making him feel necessary. Outcomes tell the truth he refuses to say. Promises that land on Tuesdays belong to one world. Promises that live as moods belong to another. Apologies that harden into habit belong to one world. Apologies that reset the meter belong to another. Needs that shrink as capacity grows belong to one world. Needs that expand to match your resources belong to another. Schopenhauer's pessimism earns its keep here because it drags you past motive into structure. It asks what persists when music stops. It asks whether the story that flatters you can stand without your blood in the tank. It asks whether the bond produces a reality that thickens with time or a theater that always needs a new audience. The answer is not rage. Rage is just another mask the will uses to avoid law. The answer is a steady recognition that a pattern is a person's plan and that plans are chosen. With recognition comes a quieter appetite. Not to be central at any price, not to be soothed at the expense of repair, not to live above the rules, but to live inside form that shelters both people from the worst of their hungers. Desire intensifies the game because Eros magnifies every signal and shortens every clock. In the marketplace where beauty opens doors and scarcity inflates price, urgency feels like fate, disclosure feels like depth, crisis feels like intimacy. The week stretches, the schedule bends, and something called love becomes a service plan delivered on demand. Tenderness is deputized into security, generosity into stipend, boundaries into insult. The will applauds because it is being stroked and spared. The structure groans because nothing is being built that can hold two full lives without one living off the other. Schopenhauer would not bless celibacy as solution. He would strip the music from the scene long enough to ask whether the dance has a flaw. Romance thrives inside form. Admiration anchored in real work steals leverage from flattery. Solitude that is practiced and not punitive steals leverage from novelty. Purpose that lives in writing steals leverage from tests that only measure how much of yourself you will sell to keep temperature up. Under that light, the repertoire sorts itself. Some tests are childish and seek control. Jealousy theater, triangles with ghosts, cold fronts that punish a no. They do not get better under patience. They dissolve under indifference. Other tests are prudent and seek trust. Questions that want clarity, curiosity that wants history, small probes that want to know whether a line stays a line. They get better around steadiness, reach, and time. In a formed climate, pace changes everything. Evenings end while still sweet. Weeks keep hours that belong to no one because those hours hold the roof up. Disagreements arrive with receipts and close with terms, rather than with loops that circle back to the same drain. Differences keep their edges because neither person is bargaining for a parent. Attraction lasts longer because admiration lasts longer. The other remains interesting when theatre is not required to replace substance. Extraction struggles there. It cannot thrive where outcomes are noticed, and sequence is respected. It needs fog, speed, and stage. The old metaphor of parasitism dissolves into a better map. Bad economies reward harvest without planting. Good economies reward planting until harvest is honest. You cannot fix the entire market. You can pick the room. You can let selection be sober rather than outsourced to hormones. You can admit the cost of wanting and refuse to pay it with yourself. You can let law, in Schopenhauer's austere sense, carry eros without flattening it, so that love becomes a force that builds a house rather than a drain that eats one. Extraction thrives on appearances because appearances can be engineered faster than realities can be built. Ambiguity keeps you spending to resolve it. Bursts of warmth accelerate pursuit. Perpetual emergency collapses agreements. Moral language rebrands standards as harm. None of this has to be plotted. It only has to be rewarded. The soft court of optics, Schopenhauer would say if he saw our day, is simply the will learning a new costume. The counter-costume is not a harder mask. It is the quiet clarity of things that can be audited when the room is hot. Reality is slower, colder, and kinder. It asks where time lands, where money moves, what work repeats into durability. It asks what breaks when a person is absent rather than what they say when they are present. It asks whether promises live as Tuesdays or live as vibes. It asks whether endings are allowed to end or whether closure is a fishing line thrown into the old water. These questions are not instructions. They are the weather in which theatre loses oxygen. When reality returns, law returns in miniature. Not codebooks, but forms that can be relied on. The appointment that holds even when bored. The budget that does not blush. The boundary that is a property line rather than a weapon. The no that is a coordination point rather than a showdown. The yes that is a vow rather than a fever. To a culture trained by spectacle, this sounds unromantic. To people who have watched love collapse under fog, it sounds like air. Schopenhauer's severity refuses to baptize collapse as kindness. He prefers the clean pain of refusing a performance to the dirty pain of living inside one. He is not counseling ice. He is counseling order so that warmth can stop being weaponized. In ordered rooms, compassion lands without rotting beams because compassion is not allowed to replace criteria. In ordered rooms, disagreement stops being war because evidence has a place to stand. In ordered rooms, affection stops being a pass and starts being a gift because law is doing the heavy lifting nobody can see. The mask then becomes obvious. The crisis that never closes a loop names itself. The apology that resets the meter names itself. The charm that evaporates around specificity names itself. People can change. Patterns tell you whether they will. Time is the judge Schopenhauer trusted when he did not trust people. Give it jurisdiction over your rooms. Theatre will still tour. It will feel less necessary. The will still press. It will meet rails. What those rails carry is life that can be shared without one life secretly paying for two. Suspicion without supply becomes brittle pose. Supply is the quiet surplus that extractive dynamics cannot counterfeit. Attention that is not for sale. A body that can bear load. Work that produces outcomes. Money that is not rented. Friendships that cut through charm. Attention hardens when mornings exist before messages arrive. When the hand reaches for work before proof. When silence is allowed to cool the room until appetite stops issuing orders. The body becomes evidence when iron and air render verdicts no rhetoric can edit. A spine that has felt weight holds lines with less theatre because the nervous system is no longer built of dings. Work restores you to a court that grades without favoritism. Products ship or they don't. Code runs or it fails. Harvests weigh what they weigh. Reputation formed, there resists weather because it lives in utility, not in optics. Money stops being a stage and starts serving oaths when bills are paid before esteem, when reserves shorten fear's leash, when generosity is funded rather than performed. In that climate, flattery loses leverage because applause is not the only oxygen. Disapproval becomes weather because identity is vow-dependent rather than audience-dependent. Friendship then performs its old function, not chorus, but ballast. A small circle that will laugh at your lie and point to the ledger is worth more than 1,000 sympathizers who keep the show running. Feedback arrives before flattery, and change follows feedback without spectacle. Heat lowers across the week. There are fewer late messages, fewer performative reckonings, fewer scenes where everyone is on stage instead of at work. Romance that remains feels less cinematic and more alive because it is not being used to prop up a starving self. The will that once demanded exemption calms when it is fed with craft, sleep, and earned respect. Schopenhauer's gloom begins to look like clarity about inputs, where fuel grows by doing and resting, where affection is a gift, not an anesthetic, where belonging is earned by shared burdens rather than synchronized resentment. The economics of extraction get worse. Parasites prefer hosts who are open and unstructured. Structure is not a cage. It is ribs that let the heart beat. Ribs look plain. They keep houses standing. In a rib cage like that, love has room and drains have little to grip. You will still be tempted by shortcuts because the will never sleeps. You will be less purchasable. You will be more generous where reciprocity lives, because you are no longer paying invisible taxes to performances you did not choose. Extraction loves scenes because scenes keep actors on stage. Closure that starves the loop is quiet. It names a pattern without prosecution, changes access without spectacle, disentangles time and money, and refuses the gravity that drags endings back into openings. Accusation will follow because accusation is a fishing line cast into familiar water. The hook needs attention to hold. Attention returns to work, to friends who tell the truth, to a body that slept and lifted, and the line comes up empty. Standards will be called harm by those who prospered under standardlessness. Translation clarifies the weather. A subsidy ended. Grief remains. It becomes clean when it is not used to reopen negotiation. Reflection becomes useful when it names the bargains you made against yourself, the compliments you believed too quickly, the hours you sold for belonging. Lessons harden into rules your tired self will keep, not because a feed applauds, but because the ledger does. The next room can then be chosen by its response to honesty. In some rooms, clarity is relief, and people lean forward. In others, clarity is threat, and people perform. The first kind grows families, teams, friendships, and crafts. The second grows headlines. Schopenhauer is caricatured as anti-relationship. The cleaner reading is anti-devouring relationship. Bonds that eat the hours the work needs, and then blame the work for starving them, are bonds that serve the will at the expense of form. Bonds that protect mornings, move conflict to forums that can decide, refuse to weaponize pity, and practice affection that does not purchase exemptions from agreed law, are bonds that shelter both people from their worst hungers. Distance is part of their warmth. Two centers can stand because neither has to become air for the other to breathe. Extend the same discipline to institutions. Do not ask them to mother you. Ask them to keep their oath. Do not ask leaders for weather. Ask for results and receipts. Do not ask crowds for absolution. Ask yourself for competence. This climate is the only one where mercy does not rot beams. Tenderness can be lavish, because law cannot be blackmailed. Disagreement can be candid because reputations are not hostage to scenes. Children can learn boredom without devices because adults remembered how to bear it. You will not fix the age, you will fix lanes. That is the point. A man with lanes is not at war with everyone. He is at work. He becomes a neighbor who can be counted on, a colleague who gives back time, a friend whose no is as trustworthy as his yes, a lover whose warmth does not ask the roof to sag. The old insult shrivels at the doorway of such rooms because the new room is populated by subjects, not symbols. The will still presses. Law still carries. The house hums. If this gave names to a drain you kept excusing, put one firm line in the comments below that guards your energy, something you can keep when tired. Like this video and share this line to a brother who measures you by deeds, and get back to work that makes love a feast instead of a siphon. Subscribe if you want philosophy that rejects empty praise and lays foundations strong enough to rebuild civilizations that endures.